Good morning, everybody. This is a wonderful Dharmic day, right? It's very nice to share the teachings with all of you, and I have to express my gratitude to Master Sheng Yen and all of the sages that have preceded him and the great teachers who have followed him, and all of the teachers that I have studied with. It's really a wonderful journey. So today I'm going to continue with my talk on the Lojong, mind training. And this is actually the 8th talk I've given on this. And I'm actually going to be talking about 5 or 6 things today. I like to give a little bit of an introduction of what Lojong is, first of all. And I'm going to be talking about slogans 27 to 30. I know it sounds like I work for an accounting firm when I use numbers like that, but that's what it is. And also talk a little bit about bodhicitta and an earlier Lojong slogan to tie the whole thing together. And I'm always interested in making this understandable to Chan, to show how the relationship is very intimate. All of these teachings are perfectly aligned with Chan, is my point of view. And all the teachers that I'm going to refer to, they include, of course, Master Sheng Yen, Pema Chodron, Norm Fisher, Trala Kyabgon, Lodro Kentrol, Taye, and Tom Campbell. So these are kind of my sources for my talk. So Lojong is something that lets us be there for others without withdrawing. This is what Pema Chodron says. So people today are really trying to heal their own wounds and trying to help others. And so these ancient teachings, which stem from the 10th century CD, help us really work with our problems, look at them out in the open in very accessible ways, like everyday language. It's what's so wonderful about these teachings. And so there are seven points to the teaching. And last time I went over them in some detail. I'm not going to do that quite today. I'm just going to summarize them. There's the first one of the preliminaries, which is the basis for Dharma practice, understanding how precious life is, recognizing impermanence and what impermanence means in our life, the unsatisfactoriness of samsara. No matter how many Lamborghinis you get, you're not insured of ultimate bliss. And the last one is the responsibility of karma, that we actually have karmic choice. And actually, I'm kind of titling this talk Karmic Choice. So those are the preliminaries. And then the main practice is training in bodhicitta, both absolute and relative. And when I get through this quick list, I'm going to talk a little bit about bodhicitta. But that main practice of bodhicitta has to do with meditative practice, seeing everything as a dream, examining the nature of unborn awareness, not getting caught in the antidote. So when we actually see something, have some sort of a realization, we don't get hooked on it. And then resting the mind in the alaya consciousness, the mind as the mind. And the last one in this section, of course, is when off the cushion, be a child of illusion. I love that one. And then there's introduction to Tonglen, this giving and receiving, where you're really combining absolute and relative bodhicitta. I mean, they're one and the same. I just explained the absolute, which is the mind of the Buddha. Bodhicitta actually means bodhi is awakening, citta is mind. So that is the mind of the Buddha is bodhicitta. But bodhicitta also means thought of bodhi. So it's this idea that you have this aspiration to awakening, and that's very important. And the relative bodhicitta is that you're aware of everybody else in the world and you're trying to help them and yourselves at the same time by getting them to be motivated to look inside themselves and understand the nature of suffering. And then the practice moves on to transformation of bad circumstances into the way of enlightenment. And that's a very rich and somewhat complicated section. I did an earlier talk. And then showing the utilization of practice in one's whole life. And that's where 5 practices are given for life and for death. And then there's an evaluation of mind training to expand and extend your training. And then the section that we got to last week was called the discipline of mind training. And Norm Fisher calls it the discipline of relationships. And this to me is one of the things that's so compelling about this whole teaching, because Jimmy, you sometimes in explaining emptiness, which has many different explanations, but he says emptiness is relationships. It's our connection to everyone, which is what it is without our added delusionary kind of take on things, whether we're angry or jealous or sad. But whatever is happening, we're always in connection, a dynamic interplay between us and everyone else. And these slogans are really helping that and showing us the way, if you will. So a little bit more about bodhicitta. And I'm quoting here from this great teacher in the Tibetan tradition, Ken MacLeod. So what bodhicitta is about is transforming emotional energy into attention, which is quite a statement right there, right? Because usually we're so caught up in what's happening, we don't see what's happening. So that's part of what bodhicitta helps. In Mahayana practice, compassion is both a practice and a result. So it's part of how we embark on the path. It's the goal and it's the path itself. Compassion is used to transform emotional reactivity and attention, as I said, and that attention in turn is used to awaken the nature of mind, which is emptiness. But then that emptiness becomes the basis for a different kind of compassion. So there's this interweaving of emptiness and compassion, and that's expressed in the word bodhicitta. So bodhicitta is just one word, but it really opens up a whole world of meaning and practice and understanding. And the usual meaning, the usual translation in English is the awakening mind. That's how bodhicitta is often translated. And it's presented so that we can make use of whatever we encounter in our lives to deepen and enhance our experience of awakening. So there's that statement we often hear in Chan that the present moment is unacceptable. But with bodhicitta, everything is received. Everything is acceptable in the sense that you are perceiving it and you have the wherewithal to act on it, as opposed to just cower away, ignore it, or get overly upset. So I think Chan, this is like the heart of Chan, I believe. And you can see that in some of the things that Sherfu did in the world, like his spiritual environmentalism, that there really is a path that we can use that will help other people. So there are 3 kinds of bodhicitta, and I just want to go over these quickly because, once again, when you have this word in your mind and you can see the depth of it, then it might be helpful. So there's the first thing is the straightforward wish that to help other people. That's called king or queen-like bodhicitta. It's a wish to help other people and realize through the power of our own virtue and understanding that we can do that. And then that understanding and acceptance of mortality, which is a big deal, gives rise to boatman-like bodhicitta, like we're on a boat or a bus. You know, we have all these sentient beings that we're trying to help, metaphorically, if you will, and actually in other ways. And we can be at peace with the way life is. And then the third kind of compassion is the direct knowing of non-self. So that's called shepherd-like bodhicitta. So there's no comparison, not even a conceit of equality, just the intention to guide others as best we can to the peace and understanding of freedom with little concern for ourselves. So it's both a big task and a little task. And so to set the tone for the talk, I'm going to tell a story, an old Cherokee story, which many people probably know, but as a guideline for the talk and a way of looking deeper into these things, I think it's helpful. So here's the story. An old Cherokee gives advice to his grandson. "A fight is going on inside me," he said to the boy. "It is a terrible fight between two wolves. One evil, that's the hatred, anger, greed, envy, arrogance, grudging, resentment, miserliness, and cowardliness. So that's one of the wolves, this evil wolf. The other, that's happiness, joy, serenity, love, kindness, compassion, hope, humility, generosity, truthfulness, and confidence. They are also fighting inside you and inside every other person too." The child thought about it for a minute and asked his grandfather, "Which wolf will win, right? The evil wolf or the good wolf?" And the old Cherokee simply replied, "The one you feed," right? That's the one. And so this could be a great Chan teaching. And so this is going to go through this whole talk of the slogans that I go through. There's kind of choice, karmic choice in this. And of course, I did bring my my disciple, Zag, who's going to watch and make sure that I don't make any mistakes. Is that right? Mm-hmm. And he just returned from a long retreat. How long? 1 kalpa. It's a really, really long retreat, and you are in a constant state of samadhi. Can you hear what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Then how did you know? Samadhi. Okay. All right. So this is you know, we're getting to the depths of things that are mysterious beyond our normal understanding. Okay. So give a little bow. You'll come back later. Okay. So he's here. He's advising me in this talk. All right. So one of the things I want to do is talk about an earlier slogan, which I think is really amazing. And I've been studying these slogans for a number of years, and I find I come back to them, and each time I have a little bit more of an understanding. So this slogan is simply called 3 objects, 3 poisons, and 3 virtues. I did this in an earlier talk, but I'm doing it again because I think it's kind of a bridge between the bodhicittas. So let me explain this. The objects are not what you would think. You'd think when someone talked about objects, you would think they were talking about this table or the wall or the floor. That's an object we would normally think of our vision. But that's not what the objects here. The objects are the nature of our reactivity as deluded sentient beings. So there are 3 objects, which are liking, disliking, and neutrality. Those are the 3 objects. So whenever we encounter anything, the things that we usually think are objects, these type of feelings, these type of takes and judgments, we're always judging, are always arising. And what we are encountering these feelings with and what they are fueled by are the 3 poisons: greed, hatred, and ignorance. But once again, we have choice all the time when we are moving through the world, whether we're in meditation or we're talking to someone. So when things arise, when these feelings arise, we don't have to feed them like the wolf in within the old Cherokee. We could feed the other wolf, or eventually no wolves. It's pretty uncomfortable to have wolves inside you, I think. You'd think one of them would be a lamb rather than a wolf, but I don't want to work the metaphor too much. So what are the three virtues? This is really interesting. The three virtues are non-hate, non-greed, non-ignorance. So you might think that the virtues would be, well, happiness or love or wisdom, but it's not saying that. So this is really subtle, really important. It means that in every moment you have this freedom on a certain level. I mean, this is, it's a very deep teaching, perhaps not the most, but it's a really important thing to look at. So what slogans are doing are giving us a heads up on the way we encounter the world and help us recognize these things, because it's happening all the time. Moment to moment, our minds are reacting to the world. Most of the time, if you're someone like me and other people, you're reacting to your own stories. You're not even aware of what's outside. But within those stories, all of these poisons can come up, and you can recognize them. And of course, ultimately, you can see the emptiness of all of these kind of interactions, that they're just products of the mind, which we take to be absolute reality outside in the world, separate from us, permanent. That's how we react usually to the things we encounter, to ourselves, the sense of self, and the people around us, the people we're in relationships in. We have a mental picture of who people are, and more importantly, who people should be. Right? You should be who I want you to be. Right? That's kind of our. One second, my text went away here. There we go. Using this slogan of the three objects, the three poisons, the three virtues, is once again something that will reinforce the teaching for us, so that we don't believe the things that are coming in our minds, right? The phrase is, don't believe everything that you think. So this is a very helpful slogan. And once again, as I present this in a Chan atmosphere, I certainly recommend looking at these things. I've mentioned this in the past. All of these slogans can be treated like watos. You can sort of carry it around and see how you are interacting with the world. And one of the reasons that I find Lojong very helpful is because, as a longtime practitioner, 50 years now, I find you can just get into a rut with the teachings, and you're sort of filled with buzzwords. This is my issue, that I have a crusade to cut through buzzwords, because I can explain a lot of things very easily conceptually. That doesn't mean they're in my heart. So I'm really trying to do my best to see through my normal illusory mind. So now we have arrived at the four slogans that we're going to do today. And so we'll start with the first. And what's really interesting about these slogans is, in a certain way, they're all the same. Right? And that's really important, because just because you hear something, right, and you understand it and you like it, just because of all that doesn't mean it really sinks in. So what I do, and what I find really fascinating, is I give a variety of teachers' opinions on these slogans, and everyone is different. I mean, everyone highlights a little bit of a different point, and I find it enormously helpful to sort of round out, because sometimes things come into one's mind and they go to sleep. Right. Did you hear what I said? No, I was sleeping. You see, it's really hard to connect. But anyway, so, all right, here we go. Number 27, of the two witnesses hold the principal one. So this one is a slogan. It sounds like a no-brainer. It's like, I'm doing a crossword puzzle and my house is on fire. Which one should I tend to first? Right. It's ridiculous if you look at it that way. But this slogan is very, very subtle. So I have to listen to. So what I'm quoting Pema Chodron, right? Other people have all sorts of ideas about you. You're the one who truly knows when you're at odds with yourself, which might not always be true. Sometimes we're at odds with ourselves and we don't know it. But, and then Joko Beck, Charlotte Joko Beck, I'm teaching a class with her writings. She often talks about the polarities that are within us. I'm not talking about political polarization. I'm talking about internal polarization. What this is really talking about is getting clear about your greatest defilements and working on the most difficult one first. And as you'll see when we go through this, that can be tricky. It's not like we're always so clear about these things. So here's Norm Fisher. So he says that each one of us is given our own personal gift of craziness, our own preferred tendency for decompensation, right? Trying to deny things and get out of things, right? Some get angry, some depressed, some anxious, some are meddlesome, some lazy, some hyperactive, some distractible. So we find that there's no normal. We're all abnormal, right? My son, who went to a special college called Landmark, which was for people with learning disabilities, when it came to graduation, the valedictorian said, when you go to this school, you don't have to worry about being different because everybody's different here, right? There's no illusion of conformity. So the trick, of course, is to accept your little quirks. I always like to quote Robert Frost, who, in speaking to God, he said, if you'll forgive my little tricks on you, I'll forgive your great big one on me. You can think about how you want to interpret that. So let's say it's anger. You anger easily. And you've been this way your whole life. But now you can look at it as your personal gift. Scherfel used to speak about things like this, about the 1,000-year-old toilet that's inside of us, that it's the last thing in the world we want to look at, but it's also our treasure, right? So that's from Suzuki Roshi, who said that a weed, a flower that you don't want, is a treasure. So when you see it as a treasure, your whole orientation changes, right? Rather than running away from yourself or hiding from others, you accept, that you're not perfect. You're a lot more imperfect than you'd like to admit to, but there it is right in front of you. So you resolve to pay attention. That's one of the things that's sitting at the back of this slogan, right? You pay attention, and you realize also that you don't have to overcome your biggest problem overnight. So once again, inherent in this slogan is the idea of patience. And in all of the slogans, all of the precepts are there, all of the paramitas. They're just expressed in different ways and in much more everyday language. And because this is the discipline of relationships, in Fisher's words, so you see what bothers you most about your relationships to others, and you can trust that simply by being clear about that you'll know what you need to do. Not that it'll go away. Could get better, could get worse, who knows? But at least you're on the side of causes and conditions, and you're not just, battered around like that Zen story of the man in the forest that sees a man barreling towards him on a wild horse, and he says to the man, "Where are you going?" And the man says, "Don't ask me, ask the horse." So that's usually our situation. Now, Cab Gun Trolig, well, okay. My orders seem to have changed a little bit. Just give me 1 second. I think in opening up this file, got a little change, but it's not a problem. So let me talk more about Tom Campbell's take on this. Very interesting. So this slogan is really about working with categories and going beyond that. We work with categories all of the time. We're stuck with them. So we think, but we don't have to, because we are the ones who are producing them. So once again, this slogan says you can't do everything at once. And the issue, and the Buddha boiled this down to one word, is ignorance, right? And there's this really, really old joke about two guys that are standing next to one another, and one of them is crying. And the other one says, "Why are you crying?" And the person who's crying turns to him and says, "Because you're stepping on my foot." Now, you could really read a lot into that. Like, why didn't he know it? Why didn't the person speak up? But there's something very true about that joke, I think, because people let things go in all sorts of different ways. So we can recognize that we have all sorts of different kinds of suffering and emotional attachments, and we can start to look at how we experience it, and we can look at something that he calls the poison stream, which I think is really interesting. So anyone who's been practicing for a week has heard about the three poisons: greed, hatred, and ignorance. Those are just words. What is it really like inside our mind? What's really going on? And because, our thoughts tend to daisy chain, they connect one to another. And one kind of emotion or one kind of thought will bring up another thought, on and on and on. So there really is kind of a stream in the mind. And we don't really see it until we're upset. It's like Sherfu says in his book on the 37 Wings of Enlightenment. You really don't think much about your body until it's hurting you, right? Everybody here brought their bodies today, right? Raise your hand. Okay, good. See, sometimes he listens, which is nice. And then there are all sorts of things that we can suffer from, like imposter syndrome, or just being annoyed by our neighbors, right? There's just, 84,000 and counting kinds of vexations. What are you going to address first? And so one of the things that this slogan really addresses is the idea and the feeling of being overwhelmed. It's very easy to get overwhelmed. Just get away. I don't want to talk about it. It's too much. But you can see a little thread of something that you can really work on. And that's where the patience is so important. And what's also so profound about this particular slogan, if you see it as not a slogan so much as part of your meditation, then it will drill down to deeper concerns. But you want to work on the main defilement first, and most people will see that they have a dominant poison, and that's a good thing to find out. Oh, you know, I'm just sad all the time. Nothing good is happening, so this is my dominant poison, sadness. Or I don't like what's going on in the world and politics and this. My blood is boiling, so my dominant poison is anger. And sometimes it can be so dominating that you don't even see it. You think that's, you know, of course, it's reality. You know, people who are dominated by desire, they just buy one product after another. And only until you could admit to yourself that these poisons are driving your life in some way, that's when these slogans and our Chan practice really come into play. Otherwise, you're just not taking it seriously. You're just glomming on to what feels good. And that is something that's very easy to do. I've had many periods in my practice where I thought I was, open quotes, sitting well, and I had a lot of good feelings, but there was a lot underneath the surface that I was just ignoring. So this really happens. And some people may know about Marshall McLuhan, who was a very famous person in the 60s and 70s, who wrote about communication. And his famous phrase is, the message, the medium is the message, or the message is the medium. So we're really influenced by the way we get information. But one phrase that he came up, which I really love, it's called label libel. It means once you have identified a problem, you've solved it, which is not true. And there are actually psychological equivalents of this. There's evaluative fallacy, and my favorite, diagnostic myopia, right? You're just looking at things narrowly. So Lojong 27 is an antidote to this kind of shallow reflection and misapplied action. And so, okay, something in my file. Well, this is technology. All right, so I'm just going to just wing it more on 27. So there's a lot of noise outside, so I'm just being quiet for a second. All right, so this is really kind of interesting. I have a corrupt file I'm working with. All right, so with let me talk about number 27 a little bit more. It's about looking more deeply into oneself and recognizing what's present in the mind, and that in itself is one of the benefits of the slogan. So the slogan has real meaning within its content and within its application. And so that's now number 28 is a slogan which really is very, very challenging for people to hear. And that is abandon all hope, or it's really, the way that it's really understood is abandon the hope of fruition. So we can ask, like, what are we actually hoping for, and how we are so caught up in hope, which is a product of our deluded minds. If you think about it, if you're hoping for some change in your life and you're really miserable, then that wish is going to come out of your confusion. And so when you come up with a plan that is based on confusion, the goal of the plan is apt to be confused. And then what we do is we glom on to the understanding of the hope of what may come, and it's just a fantasy, right? And this particular slogan is not about not having an aspiration, not about not believing in your potential, but it is about not believing in your poisons, right? Because a lot of what we hope for is based on our poisons, which is what we were talking about in the last slogan. So the question is, what are we really hoping for? This is what Norm Fisher says, and this is a really interesting thing to look at, because most of us who practice are really looking for some change, right? There's no way to deny that, I think, right? The basis of the practice is suffering, right? Or stress, dissatisfaction, unreliability, all of the things that often make us do things that we wish we hadn't done, and lead us in directions which are really not wholesome. On the other hand, people who have practiced for a long time find a certain calmness, right? And one of the things, of course, about abandoning hope is abandoning about the hope for enlightenment, right? Because enlightenment is the kind of thing that you can hear on television, right? It's just, kind of an empty word. And it reminds me of something from the play Marat Sade, where they're talking about the French Revolution. And there's a song where Marat is talking about what people hope the revolution will bring them. And so one person thinks the revolution will bring them a new pair of shoes. Another person thinks the revolution will bring them a new wife. Another person thinks the revolution will bring them a new store. So it's just this hope, right? This delusion which people really cling on. And I think you can see that goes on in our country politically. People have hope for all sorts of things. And if we're not clear about this, what we're hoping for, and really drilling down into what that means, right? Once again, everything that I'm saying is just encased in words, but what everyone has to do for themselves is to distill it and find the true meaning. So then you can see, well, am I potentially sabotaging myself in some way that I had never even thought about? And you can recognize it's a hard truth, but the things that we fantasize about the future are never accurate. 100% never accurate. Sometimes we convince ourselves that if we're looking forward to something and it turns out to be okay, then this is just what I hope for. But it isn't. It's interesting. I read something in Tricycle, actually from someone, Guo Junfasher used to be abbot here, and talking about karma. And this is a really good thing to inject in the discussion right now, because one of the things about karma, it's very complex, but it's really, really complex, and we don't see how things really turn out. So the metaphor is, if you take one mango seed, right? That and they're pretty big. You plant the mango seed, and that produces a mango tree, which then produces hundreds of mangoes, which have more mango seeds, which can produce hundreds and hundreds of mango seeds. And it's just, and no one, if you held a mango seed in your hand, you couldn't see what was going to happen. It's kind of like the butterfly effect. And actually, I saw a program on Genghis Khan the other day, and evidently, some 4 or 5% of people alive today have his genes, because he was so him and his sons, his DNA has been identified in so many people. So these things are really, really far reaching. And, we have to look at the whole picture. And there's another metaphor that's very helpful in dealing with this, which is the metaphor of an archer shooting an arrow. This really works well with this idea of not holding on to a goal. So if you have an arrow and the target is right in front of you, you would think all of your attention is on the target. I want to hit that target. But that's not the formula for success, because the target never gets hit unless you send the arrow out properly. And in order to do that, you have to be aware of your stance, your breathing, what's in your mind, the clarity, everything, so that when the arrow is released, it's released cleanly. And so once again, this slogan, which seems so, well, it seems crazy, of course, abandon all hope or abandon the hope of fruition. But it's really arguing for clarity of mind, seeing what is actually possible in the present moment, and having a clear idea of what a path could be. And of course, the famous phrase with Master Yunnan, when he was asked, what's the teaching of a lifetime? And he said, an appropriate response. And that's really a big deal, because some of us are really clueless about these things. And, we're also caught up in ideas like improvement, which is something that is important. You don't want to stay in your particular miserable or confused state. But actually, when I was a kid, there was a company, GE, used to have their slogan. Remember their slogan? Progress is our most important product. That was their slogan. Try eating progress sometime. See how nourishing it is. I mean, it was an idea, and it was to motivate their workers or whatever, but it's also kind of fostering an illusion. And then eventually we develop faith through our own practice. We develop confidence. So to substitute confidence for illusory hope would really be a wonderful thing. But this is something where it's, once again, it's just a slogan. There's a lot of practice, a lot of turning the light around and insight before we get there. And another thing that one can do to work on abandoning hope is about generosity, right? And all of these slogans are about leaving behind our self-clinging. It's really important. Our tendency to just want to acquire one thing after another. Because the comedian Steve Wright once said, you can't have everything. Where would you put it? Right. So, there's a certain limit, right? So, and the other thing which is really important to recognize in this slogan is to be free of a desire for rewards, which is also hard. I mean, I used to be a headhunter in sales, and everything that I did was really trying to sort of talk to people and sometimes send gifts or whatever in the hope I got something in return. That was business, and that's sort of normal. But in terms of our path, what we're trying to do is spreading the Dharma, because that's what the Dharma is. It's incredibly spreadable, like not like margarine, but it's what it is. If we really recognize what it is, then there's nothing that we can hold on to basically all that we can do is to share it and motivate other people to motivate other people. That's kind of what our practice is. Yeah, so a lot of these teachers talk about personal gain and wishing away all the problems that we have. And one other thing that Tom mentioned, I think is really interesting in Abandon Hope. And I wouldn't have seen this, but you can take this and evaluate it as you will. Abandon Hope is about grief. I mean, many of us have grief, and grief is sometimes defined as love that has no place to land. So grief is very hard to deal with because it's about finality. When someone has passed, or you've totally lost something and it's not coming back, there's no worldly solution. The only solution is working with your mind. And so abandon the fruition of hope, can drill down even deeper into that arena of grief that we have, things that we are holding on to. And that kind of grief can be loss of a person. It can also be loss of an opportunity. I wanted to be a doctor, an astronaut, a rock musician, and unfortunately I couldn't play. So I couldn't become a rock musician, but that wouldn't prevent me from grieving about it, right? From feeling my whole life, gee, why can't I be as smart as X? Why can't I be as wealthy as Y? And why can't I have whatever Z has, right? People walk around with this their whole lives, these kind of wispy, nostalgia for things that never really happened, And actually, Pema Chodron talks about nostalgia for samsara, right? Oh, I really miss my suffering. At least I knew who I thought I was when I was really suffering horribly, and now that I feel better, I don't know what to do with myself. That can happen. So. Let's see here. Okay. Now, so we've done 27 of the two defilements. Pick which one is most prominent, and we did 28, abandon hope, abandon the fruition of hope. Now we're on Lojong 29. Don't eat poison. How's that for a slogan? Abandon poisonous food. And you'll see, if you really look into all of these slogans, you'll see how deeply connected they all are. We're all talking about the same thing, which is ultimately self-clinging, but we're coming at it from different angles. And you'll see, especially when we get to Kentrel, he talks about weapons that we can use, which we sometimes need. But here we go with don't eat poison. So Pema says, it's good for you. Anything becomes poisonous when you cling to it. Just like to stop. Now, how's that for an interesting thing, right? I mean, the thing that you like so much, the idea that it could become poisonous is really an interesting insight, especially if you become obsessed with it, really. You don't have to take these things too seriously. So Pema says it's like keeping yourself in a room with doors and windows locked. Norm Fisher says that this slogan is really a corollary to abandon hope. So the real poison is self-centeredness, which is really sneaky. I mean, if it wasn't sneaky, we wouldn't be here. We wouldn't have to study the Dharma if we were, if the self-centeredness was right there and we'd said, get out of here. But it doesn't quite work that way. So the point of all of the training is to reduce our self-worry and self-concern, and to transform that to concern, not worry, but concern for others, right? And this is why I found it so helpful to just get my mind moving in that direction. So stop poisoning yourself with self-concern, he says. when you feel instances, when you experience instances of self-criticism, discouragement or pride, remember this slogan, right? You know, it's really like right at the moment that you're in well, especially these subtle ones, self-criticism, prideful, not so much the real anger or pride. It's these other things about self-image that might say, you know, I'm a loser, I can't do it, everybody knows more than I do, or I'm more wonderful than everyone, whatever it is. If you can see in that moment, and actually the real teaching is to see the emptiness of these things that are coming in your mind. But in that moment, if you could see, hey, I'm poisoning myself. You know, there is that phrase many of you've heard about resentment. Having resentment is like drinking a cup of poison and expecting someone else in the room to drop dead. Right? I mean, you're the one who's getting the poison. So your goal is not to eliminate. Very important. These things that are coming up, you're not saying, okay, like it's a magic word and it's going to go away. No, it's about practice. You practice the slogan. And it's kind of like Norm says, no, thank you. I don't eat that stuff anymore. I know it's bad for me. Trala Kyabkan says, nutritious food is nourishing because it keeps us healthy. Poisonous food, on the other hand, is extremely dangerous to our health. So virtuous thoughts are highly valued, but if we engage with them for the wrong reasons, they can become poisoned. And this is really interesting to contemplate in using the Four Noble Exertions, I think, you know, of trying to get rid of unwholesome thoughts, the first one, keeping unwholesome thoughts out of the mind, inviting wholesome thoughts and maintaining wholesome thoughts. It can be very tricky, right? I think that's one of the things that also I like about Lojong, because we have these wonderful teachings of the Four Noble Exertions, very helpful, but our minds are sneaky and tricky. And so we can glom onto things and think we're wonderful, we're really doing it correctly. So we always have to be careful of what we're clinging to, right? And so hidden agendas that we might have. There's a later Lojong slogan, which is called "Don't Wait in Ambush," where you have some kind of thought in your mind and you're ready to spring it on everyone you meet. So, you know, it's like going after gratification, looking into our selfishness and understanding this is a really key point. There's a big difference between personal gratification and ego gratification. Interestingly enough, there's a scholar, Ray Garfield, that I heard a podcast of him. He has a new book about the self, and he makes this point, which I'll admit I'm not quite clear on yet, but I'm working on it. You know, we don't have a permanent self, but he says we are persons. We are, you know, we are persons in the world. Right? I mean, that's a fact. Continually changing. We're vulnerable. We're subject to impermanence, but that kind of presence really exists, and that is about the discipline of relationships. That's one of the things that's really nice and clear about it. So you can see, where am I just being this kind of scrunchy little self? Do you know what I'm talking about? Yeah, that's me. Look, it just is a little demonstration of a self that is just so tightly woven that, can you breathe? Right? It's not good for your health. You see that? Okay, relax. Look at that. Better? Much. Okay. So you know, these are things really to get very clear on. Actually, I tell another story. It's just really good in illustrating this. This is about a lama whose practice was intention. You know what's in his mind. That was his practice. And there were some very wealthy patrons that were coming to the monastery. And this particular lama was known to be a slob. So, but he knew these patrons were coming, so he cleaned up everything. And just before they came, he thought to himself, I'm really being insincere here. So he took dirt and put it over this whole place. So it was like a big mess again, right? Because he was acting in bad faith, and he recognized that. And, it's an interesting story. You can, make of it what you will. So, anyway, and we can really get so caught up in thinking that what we're doing is correct, or worrying about what we're doing is correct. And once again, this all can be somewhat poisonous. And I just think it's an interesting thing to really talk about poison. It's not the most lovely subject. It's like, hello, everyone, let's talk about poison, because it just brings up perhaps unpleasant sensations. But I'm not talking about the words poison. I'm talking about all of us, our lives and what we're suffering with. And then I think you really can look at this stuff as our treasure when you look at it properly. And then we get to Lojong number 30. This is the fourth one, and the last one. So this one is also deceptively simple. It's don't be so predictable. That's the slogan. So Pema explains that it's often translated as "don't be so trustworthy." Right now, that's also should sort of raise some eyebrows. Don't be trustworthy? What? But you have to see how it's explained. One of the things that my teacher Tom would say, that our identity is much more fluid than we think, and we're really addicted to things. And that's where this is pointing to, about the trustworthiness. And so it's about protecting our reputation, I think, in a way of like, well, I want to be there in a particular kind of way so that people will have this view of me. That's what this is all about, because all of these slogans are about the discipline of relationships. How are we acting towards other people? How are we even acknowledging that other people exist and they're not figments of our imagination? And how concerned are we about how we are viewed? And I remember there's this play, Death of a Salesman. Willie Loman is the salesman who's obsessed with this thing of how are people viewed by other people. And so he talks about a salesman who had hundreds of people come to his funeral. And so Willie Loman says he was well-liked. And someone else brings up another person. And Willie Loman says, well, he was liked, but he wasn't well-liked. So it's just that kind, and that is so, resonates so deeply with the character. And this is what this is bringing out, these slogans, what resonates so deeply with us, what we hold on to so strongly. This is, as Pema says, this is why advertising works, right? If you use a particular hair cream, everybody will love you. This doesn't work for the Foshers, right? But, it doesn't work for me either, for that matter. And what this does, it lets us see how people push our buttons, and lets us see that we even have buttons, right? We don't like to think of ourselves as being vulnerable or having a personality that hides from things, and we tend to hide, actually. And so the idea about don't react predictably is don't react predictably to pain and pleasure, to basking in someone's generosity and holding on to someone's meanness for the rest of your life. So it's really about not holding on to grudges. Someone who's grumpy, and they've been grumpy their whole life. They've been filled with grudges their whole life. So that's the kind of predictability they could do without. So what Norm Fisher says is, you and everyone else you know are unfathomable. That's another thing to contemplate. I mean, if we truly knew ourselves, well, once again, we wouldn't be here. Right? We wouldn't have any problems. So why do we persist in imagining that we know who we are and we know who everyone else is? You know, that person, they're a jerk. Oh, he's my best friend, this and that. We just have these labels, and they can change. You know, a good friend can become an enemy can become a good friend. So we can look at our responses and our habits, you know, the habitual tendency, and we can look at them and see that they're not too wholesome or even sane, but we really can't, you know, keep ourselves from grasping on things that we found so attractive, even if we look at it in a larger analysis and see that those activities have been causing us harm. It's very hard, right? So we're all fixated on the identities we have constructed with the help of our families and friends. And we consider this to be accurate reflections of our possibilities, of who we are, but they're not. And this is something that the practice, whatever tradition you're in, really helps with. It shakes us up because we've gone to sleep with our tendencies. Is that correct? I don't have any habits. Come on, yeah, I must have some. I travel with you, study the Dharma, and I go to sleep. Good night. All right. Anything else? Later. So this is, you know, so that's actually, so using Zag, that's a habitual tendency, right? You don't want to be cut off. All right. So, you know, it's an attachment, right? You know, you get to see it and like I use it and make fun with it, but that's really where it's coming from. So, and what we can find when we really look deeply into this slogan is that we can have the power to avoid being duped, to being fooled, as we often are, by a variety of things, by ourselves, by the people we're with, people who give us bad advice, even though they're well-meaning. They're really not listening to us. And we can have the wherewithal to see through that. Right. So you know, just a friendly appearance doesn't mean that they're trustworthy. And your sense, you know, just to follow up with what I said earlier about being trustworthy, may have many components to it where you're just not clear about what you're really doing. So from Ayurveda, he writes a quatrain that said, "Desire is no friend, but seems like one, which is why you do not fear it. But shouldn't people particularly rid themselves of a harmful friend?" So that, you know, that's really interesting. So desire feels good, like a friend, right? And you don't fear it. And so it's pointing out that's kind of a problem. Right. You know, sometimes dealing with the things that make us feel good, that are pleasant or whatever, in terms of practice, are more difficult than difficult things that really cause us to suffer. Right. Because by their very nature, when something hurts, we want it to stop. When something is pleasant, we want it to continue. And it's much harder to look at. So that's a harmful friend. And so mind training, as Norm continues, is not simply about learning how to be accommodating. It's whether we can recognize what is beneficial for us and what is only going to be harmful. And if we examine ourselves more closely, we might find that blindly showing good-naturedness is one of our most problematic impulses. I mean, I think that's really interesting. I think it's something can relate to. I know people like that. You really have a cheerful personality. You're born sunny side up. But there could be stuff that you're just ignoring, that you're blind about. And using a slogan like this, using what the slogan is pointing to, can really be helpful. And what we're really pointing out are some of our deep, deep attachments. We have shallow attachments and we have really, really deep ones. And we have patterns that we duplicate over and over and over again. And these 4 slogans are really getting us to look more deeply in it. So, Kentrol says that the Tibetan word for, which is a great compliment, is a reliable person. But he's pointing out that what's really addressed in this slogan is our grudges. Don't be loyal to your grudges. Give up anger and resentment. And it's crucial to learn how to let go. And then look at the formulas that you're holding on, your go-to procedures when something happens. You can see if you're continually going back, the same things which have been causing you suffering. So you don't want to make yourself into a formula. And so, I had a part, like I said, this has been a very interesting talk because I had a corrupted file. Anyway, so I think let me just summarize what I've said today. I mean, I talked about just the uses of Lojong, how it really helps us get out of ourselves, be relating to other people. And I talked about bodhicitta, the 3 types of bodhicitta, where we're just clear that we want to help people, and then we're clear about accepting all of the imperfections in the world, and then we get to a point of no self, true absolute bodhicitta. And I mentioned the story of the Cherokee, right, with the 2 wolves, right, which this has been moving through everything I've said. The wolf of greed, hatred, and resentment, the wolf of kindness and relatedness. And it's interesting to look at that, so he said the one that grows is the one that you feed, but it doesn't mean that you'll starve the other one immediately, right? So we're really talking about patience and looking at things just the way they really, really are. And I spoke about the Lojong slogan number 9, 3 objects, 3 poisons, 3 virtues, letting us see how we react on a very simple surface, yet very deep level to what's arising in every moment, recognizing how we either like, dislike, or are ignorant or neutral on certain things. So that's a very important slogan. And then I did, 27, the lesser, or work on the greater of the 2 defilements, and showed how clear you have to be to really do that. And then 28 was abandon hope, and how you can once again look in another arena. That's what's so really interesting about these slogans. We have so many domains in our lives, so many different people we work with, so many different things that we're called upon when we're dealing with other people. So we can really shine the light over here and sort of have darkness over here. So the slogans, and I just did 4 today, are really trying to light up the whole mental arena of what our lives actually are. So that was abandon hope. 29 was not to eat poison, recognizing how in a given moment, what have I, you like 29. Great if I started the poison store, right? No, it's a funny one, but it's really talking about moment to moment awareness of what you're actually working with That's why that slogan is so helpful. It just has a funny kind of sense to it. Don't eat poison. And then the last one, don't be so predictable. It's really asking you to look deeply, deeply into the patterns that you have replicated, sometimes from childhood and from beyond. So it's 12:10, and I want to thank everyone for coming, and thank you. You did a great job. What did I do? You were you, right? That's what I've been talking about. Here is an example of someone who's truly itself, a non-sentient being who's a great practitioner. Oh, thanks. Don't let it go to your head. Okay. So any questions or comments? I'm very happy to respond and continue. What makes you think I'm not a kid anymore? No, this is, I got this from my kids, right? But now they've grown up, so I have to, you know, I took over the role. Anyway, it makes it less boring, perhaps. Yes, Bob.
When you started talking, you said, I can't quote, but something about view life as a dream, or I don't know, I'm paraphrasing, but
Yeah, that's
the dream aspect. I've heard this before a number of times over the years, and I find it kind of encouraging, but I also find it disturbing and completely baffling. And so I was wondering if there's anything you might be able to add about that.
I share this. This is one of my pet, I don't want to say peeves, but one of my pet concerns, right? Because there are other teachers who talk about waking up from the dream and that sort of thing. And this is really interesting. First of all, it doesn't mean label things as dreams. You're a dream, you're an illusion, that sort of thing. It's more about not identifying with things. It's a funny metaphor, because if you really talk about a dream, that life is a dream. If I dream that I'm being chased by a green tiger, you're not going to come over to me and say, "Oh, Harry, you know, that wasn't a green tiger; it was a blue tiger," right? It's just my stuff, that kind of dream. So that's not what it's talking about. And the other thing, so we're all in this room, right? We're all together. We're all listening to some extent, with our own thoughts, feeling our bodies, a whole bunch of things. If we had sort of a mental and physical MRI of everybody here, we'd see that everybody's sort of in a different position, right? And maybe interested, maybe not interested, maybe attracted, maybe repelled, a whole bunch of things. If you're caught in that, that's kind of what the metaphor of the dream means, as far as I can see, that you're not in the world. So a very simple way of explaining this is, if we have a discussion about the particular computer that I have, right? If I mention the make, and there's some people who really like this kind of computer, and there's some people who don't, it doesn't change what the computer is at all. This thing remains what it is, no matter what is being said about it. Now, if someone gets up and throws it against the wall, that will change the computer. But the talk about it, the perceptions about it, don't change anything. So the other thing about see things as a dream, that's what the slogan is, see everything as a dream. It's also allowing you some distance from, you know, normally when we're encountering things, they're like right up against us. You know, this is like, I'm waiting online, and all of a sudden the ticket taker booth closes. So I've been standing there for 20 minutes and it's all in vain, right? And I have to get a ticket. I have to get the train. And so, I'm in a panic. Even if I'm fully enlightened, I still have to do something, right? If I want to get somewhere. But if you see it as a dream, right, it's almost, well, these are slogans. Remember, slogans are war cries. And actually, I didn't get to Kentrell's kind of advice about using these slogans like weapons. When these things come up, this is in your toolbox, right? So looking at things as a dream is like giving you a little bit of space. It doesn't mean that everything is just, really, really floating and you don't see it. So in his book, The Infinite Mirror, which is on Cao Tung Chi, Sherfu was talking about the chair he's sitting in. And he said, this chair didn't just come out of thin air, right? I'm sitting on the chair now. That's not, this moment is not an illusion. The chair, there was a time the chair didn't exist. There's a chair I didn't exist. And there's a time when the chair won't exist. And I might not be thinking the word chair, but it's really here. But this is what's going on. If I'm caught up in my illusions about things, and which is really possible, you can be out to dinner with friends and just be in a funk about resentment about something that happened, a couple months ago, if not years ago. That's kind of the dream I think it's talking about. So if you look at it as a kind of metaphor, but don't take it too literally, but there are analogies in that, and I think these are dangerous analogies, but I'll say it. I think it's kind of interesting. So if you are chased by a green tiger, or was it a blue tiger? I forget. When you wake up, the tiger disappears. So the metaphor is that if we wake up from our dream, right? And this, when people talk about this, I think they're talking about real kensho, real full enlightenment. I mean, really waking up from the dream, not just, successfully navigating a particular situation. So then in that particular case, maybe all of your vexations are no longer a problem. But that's why I think it's really tricky to say that. It's like, oh, everything, I'm going to see everything as a dream. And then when I do that, everything's going to be hunky-dory. It's going to be fine, right? I'm just seeing everything as a dream, rather than recognizing that as a slogan is a practice, is a part of a practice. And since you brought this up, and now I thought I'll share something that I found really, really helpful. And I think a lot of you will know what I'm talking about. And it sort of relates to this. I think it really relates directly. There's a teaching that John Crook, Simon Child, Rebecca Lee use a lot. Let it through, let it be, let it go. And I've heard this 1,000 times. And there were times I thought I was using it. And I realized fairly recently that I didn't really properly understand it, because, well, you can't let something through if it's not already in your mind, right? So it's sort of silly to say let it through. If it's there, you've already let it through. But that's not what let it through means, is the way I see it now. It means you're really recognizing it's there. You're shifting your attention to it. It's not just this kind of thing like a mosquito in the room, which you're trying to ignore. It's like you placed it front and center. So, and then let it be. This is the thing where I could be wrong, but a more recent insight in it. When I was using this, I'm being very honest, I just would let it through, and that was it. I forgot about the others. I mean, I just couldn't relate to them. But I think, and this is something you can corroborate or not corroborate in meditation, when you actually recognize the thought, yes, you're no longer enthralled to, enslaved by its content. You know, I have to buy some milk. That's not too compelling. You know, I have to do my taxes. That's better. And then that could cause you to worry. But if you've recognized that thought has come into your mind and you're not going to riff off it, you're not going to have that daisy chain into, oh, I'm going to owe so much money and I don't know how to do it and I have to ask people and I'm going to bother them. This whole thing that could happen. If you don't do it and you've let it through, this is my feeling, the thought doesn't just disappear. And my analogy is it's like in Star Wars or some other movie like that, when a starship is blasted apart, right? And you see the debris kind of scattering. I think that that's what happens to thoughts once you've seen them. Because the thought didn't exist in the first place. It's empty. The thought wasn't a thought. The thought is made up of other things. Whatever made up the thought isn't just going away. The key to this thing of let it be is to watch it non-conceptually, is to just behold what's going on and not let this debris germinate other thoughts. And then once you sort of feel that it's past you and you're sort of waving goodbye to it, I guess you let it go. I didn't even know if you formally let it go, you know, and say, I let you go, never come back. I'm not entirely sure, but I think that through these teachings and other things, I have a clearer understanding of it. And I think, and you can tell me if it has something to do with the dream thing of recognizing how things will, I know it's sort of a leap, but the things that you're concerned about right now, and let's say you're dreaming right now, have a reality to them that's really very strong. If you're sort of recognizing it, and all the slogans that I talked about today sort of have that sense of the looking at things as if you call dreams and if you call illusions and delusions and fantasies dreams, so they're cutting through that. They're showing you what you're holding on to in all of these different domains that apply to people's relationships. So there's that dream-like quality to the way we hold on to things. You know, I just got a new microwave, and the microwave I had before, you pressed it like this and the door opened. This door opens by a latch, by pushing it up. So for a couple of weeks after I got it, I kept trying to push a button that doesn't exist on the microwave. You know, just the habitual tendency. I just wasn't aware. So that's kind of the dream. But it's hard, Bob. I mean, it's really hard.
I just brought what you just said brought to mind the expression, I don't want to make this worse, but the illusory body. Like, what do you do with these things?
The illusory body.
The illusory body. Like,
well,
illusory. Like it's it's illusory. It's
yeah, but I just so
yeah, that's like it's impermanent.
Well, it's impermanent. But the thing is, when you say illusory body, to you and to me, right? Those are just words.
Yeah, and
right?
I don't know what to do with it.
You know, because the next thing we'll do is look in the mirror and see how handsome or ugly we think we are, or something. As if the whole world is looking at us. I mean, it's illusory, and actually, the body is supposed to be one of the hardest things to dispense with, right? We really like our let go of.
Let go of. To let
yes.
go of.
Yeah, it's very
let go of attachment to the body.
It's really, and actually, what I think is a really good practice is to just recognize that. I mean, how many different ways do you hold on to your body? Myriad ways. I think it's,
Who are you?
I mean,
Well, no, not health. No, I'm talking about it.
every animal wants to stay alive.
Well, sure, absolutely want to stay alive. But the thing is that someday we won't. And every day things change. Some days we have headaches, or we have we sprain our ankle, or all sorts of things where our bodies are not indestructible. At least my body's not indestructible. So it's yeah, this phrase, the body, you know, is an illusion. It's really about investigating. All right. Anyway, I'm sorry. Anyone else?
Bill, do you have any questions for Harry?
Do you have any answers for me? Oh, well, that's the answer. Okay,
Is that helpful?
that was very helpful. I mean, this is.
I enjoyed this very much.
Oh, well, thank you.
What you're doing is good. What you're doing.
All right. Well,
Kind of,
I'm always interested in people's feedback. You know, I mean, I'm speaking to Chan practitioners, people who, you know, for years and years. I hope it's usable, and I hope it really folds into your Chan practice, which I think it can, because everything that I've spoken about is something that comes up. Well, I always like to quote Uchiyama Roshi, who said that Buddhism is based on life, not the other way around, right? So we're talking about our lives. All the things I'm talking about are things that we encounter. Oh, I understand. Yeah, I know. Well, we all are, right? You know, but you know, Sherfu would always say, you know, Chan has no metrics, no standards. It's not holding on. This is in that book, The Infinite Mirror. He says that Chan doesn't make a distinction between Mahayana and Theravada, right? No, that's in his. I mean, it might be news to you, but that's in the book, right? Because the idea of Mahayana and the idea of Theravada are at this moment, they're just concepts, they're words coming out of my mouth. Yeah. Right. Could be for someone who's never heard of them, they might think it was a dance like the Macarena, right? They don't know. So, so anyone's welcome to comment or, you know, question, a recipe.
Hi, can someone hear me?
Oh, hi, Echo.
How are you?
Good.
I would just want to say that the ultimate purpose of what Buddha's teaching is alleviate, you know, our sufferings. So all these things are not philosophy. It's not concept is established for a purpose. It's to deliver all sentient beings from sufferings. So for example, like Bob's question about dreams, you can debate about that from a philosophical perspective, but that's not what the reason why all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and all the great arhats saying that we should perceive things as a dream is their experience from the perspective of all the teachings, right? It is following the truth and the you know, the reality of the truth, which is causes and conditions, you know, condition arising. So whether you like it or not, it is a dream because it's not real. It is ever changing moment by moment. And that is when you are able to see things, experiencing things in this way, you will deliver your sufferings.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you for that corrective. I really appreciate that. And I think that's really important and that's really correct. I think what I was addressing was people's difficulty with the term and getting stuck on it. But I'm sure you're right that the great sages really do experience the world as a dream. And that's really important to emphasize. So thank you